"Sir, step away from the stage. This area is for press only." The voice was clipped professional. Liam Brooks kept the squeegee angled against the glass wall anyway, finishing the last clean stroke as if the champagne lights and the cameras and the billionaire herself didn't exist 12 FT away. He was a janitor. Glass was his job. Headlines were not. On stage, a towering LED of emerald leaves pulsed behind Clara. West 34, calm as a metronome. Black blazer, no jewelry except the watch she twisted when she was thinking. Emerald Park, she said into the mic, will be the green heart of Seattle. 1,000 rare trees, a living cathedral. Polite thunder rolled through the ballroom applause cameras. 100 tiny red lights hungry for a quote. Martin Cole, the project director, leaned into the podium with a smile that belonged in a quarterly report. "We've partnered with world-class horticultural suppliers, climate-controlled soil beds, advanced irrigation. Nothing like this has ever been attempted at this scale." Liam glanced at the rotating plant list on the screen names that tasted like summer, in places that weren't Seattle. He shouldn't have looked. His chest tightened anyway. Wrong rainfall, wrong pH, wrong sunlight. He shifted the spray bottle to his belt, swiped the last strip of glass, and told himself, "Not your fight." A girl with a press badge asked a question about maintenance. Martin's reply sounded like a victory lab. When the floor manager waved, the Q&A open, a hand shot up from the second row. Rosa Kim, landscape architect, sleek bob eyes that measured space. "What's your survival model for the first 6 months?" she asked with Seattle's winter. "How do you protect non-native saplings during the initial rooting?" Martin's smile thinned. "We planned for weather planned how Rosa pressed." Clara's gaze slid to Martin. He cleared his throat. "Heat mats. Supplemental light. It's covered." It wasn't. Not for these species. Not at that density. Liam felt the thought wedge into him like a splinter. The floor manager touched his arm again. "Sir, the cameras are live." "Got it," Liam said quietly. He set the squeegee in his caddy and started to wheel it away. He didn't mean to pass near Rosa. He didn't mean to let the words slip out at all. But when the plant map cycled through again, the syllables left him before he could reel them back. Shade. "Tolerance is wrong," he murmured. Rosa turned. "Excuse me." He wished he'd swallowed the sentence. "Sorry. Nothing." "No." "What did you say?" Rosa stepped closer, voice low. "Shade. Tolerance." Liam kept his eyes on the caddy. "You're grouping Silver Beach with Himalayan cedar. They'll compete like siblings that hate each other. And those camper trees, wrong coast, wrong everything." He exhaled. "You'll lose 80% before spring." Rosa blinked. "Who are you, maintenance?" he said. "I clean glass. You sure talk like you don't." Another reporter's question boomed across the room. Liam edged back, ready to disappear. Then Martin materialized beside Rosa's smile, sharpened to a blade. "What seems to be the issue?" Martin asked too loud, which meant he wanted witnesses. "Nothing." Liam said I was leaving. He said the plan will fail. Rosa offered, still watching Liam, as if she'd found a rare bird on the wrong continent. Martin let the silence stretch until nearby heads turned. "Is that so?" His eyes flicked over Liam's uniform. "Care to share your credentials, sir? Or is the squeegee your degree?" Laughter feathered through the nearest chairs. The mic picked it up enough to make it cruel. Liam felt his skin heat then cool. He could walk away. He had done it for years. "I didn't mean to interrupt," he said. "Just trees like people. Some survive on attention. Some survive because you leave them alone. These want to be left alone in the right soil at the right spacing. This plan forces them into a marriage they didn't ask for." Rosa's mouth quirked surprise, not mockery. Clara West had turned now, too. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes were absolutely not. Martin leaned toward the mic, and his voice went silky. "If you're so smart," he said, each word slow enough to be quoted later, "fix it now." The room held its breath. A camera zoomed. Someone near the back whispered, "Oh boy." Another tightened her scarf. Seattle drizzle dampening the windows behind Liam's newly perfect glass. Liam looked at Rosa, at Clara, at the map of borrowed forests. "You don't want my kind of fix?" he said. "What kind is that?" Martin chuckled. "The mop and bucket kind." "The honest kind," Liam replied, steady. "The kind that costs less money and more pride." That line didn't get a laugh. It got a different sound, the soft, brittle tinkle of something. That wasn't humor anymore. Clara stepped forward. "Mr. Brooks," he said. "Liam Brooks." "Mr. Brooks." Her voice had courtroom clarity, but the gentleness hid at the edges. "What would you change?" Liam swallowed. Every instinct screamed. "Keep your head down. Keep your job." "Start with soil," he said finally. "Bring in what already thrives here? Aldervine, Maple Douglas. Space them so their roots don't choke the rain out of each other. Use understory that feeds birds. You won't need a cathedral of lights if you build a forest that believes it's home." A murmur went through the press like wind, finding a crack. Rosa faced Clara. "He's not wrong," she said. "Not about the spacing and the species list." Martin raised a hand. "Clara, we have contracts. We have a launch date." "Dead trees are bad press," said another voice from the aisle. Harper Lane environmental journalist camera slung against a leather jacket. "So is ignoring someone who just saved you 6 months of pretending." Martin's jaw flexed. "Miss Lane, you are not part of this project. Neither is failure," she said. And yet Clara's watch caught the light as she twisted it. A storm moved behind her eyes, cost a schedule. Reputation a calculus she had learned to do faster than most people blink. When she spoke, it wasn't to Martin. "Mr. Brooks," she said, "would you meet with my team upstairs? Off the record, 10 minutes. Liam blinked. The room tilted like a ferry cresting a wave. "I'm on shift. I'll cover the shift," said a voice from the doorway. "Ralph Moreno, building manager." Practical brown jacket, the kind of man who knew where every fuse lived. He'd been watching longer than he let on. "Take the meeting, Brooks." Martin made a small sound. The kind of man makes when a chest piece he thought was safe becomes suddenly very not. "Clara, this is irregular." "Excellence always is," Harper murmured too low for the mics. Clara ignored both of them. 10 minutes, she repeated, already stepping off stage. "Rosa with me. Mr. Cole, you can join us if you can listen." Rosa bit back a smile. Martin didn't. Liam followed them through the side door into a corridor muffled by carpet and money. Conference room C smelled faintly of cedar and coffee. The glass walls looked out over a gray city that had learned to be beautiful by refusing to be sunny. Clara closed the door. No cameras now, no applause, just the hiss of rain against the windows he had cleaned. "Speak freely," she said. Liam glanced at Rosa. She gave a small nod. He moved to the whiteboard. His hand hovered over the markers, then fell to his side. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone." "Nobody asked you to be," Clara said. "I asked what you'd change." He took the cap off a marker. The squeak of ink sounded like thunder to him. He began to draw not elegant renderings, just circles and arrows, bands of shade, prevailing wind, and outline of soil layers like a cake. That could feed birds. Rosa stepped in, adding plant names beside his structures. "If we cut the ornamental imports, we can reallocate the budget to drainage." "Drainage?" Martin repeated, sitting stiffly. "This is not a bio-ale class. It's a park in a city that rains," Rosa said without looking at him. Clara's eyes tracked the drawing. "What's your yield?" she asked Liam. "Survival after 6 months. 90, he said. "If no one gets cute," Martin scoffed. "Cute tries to force a palm to live in a poem about the Northwest." Liam said, "That kind of cute." Clara's mouth did something strange. Almost a laugh, almost a confession and maintenance. Lower Liam said, "Because the forest does the work. You're partnering with what wants to live here, not babysitting what doesn't." The room was quiet again. Outside, the sky pressed closer to the glass, listening. Martin folded his arms. "We've already paid deposits." "And you'll pay more?" Clara said, still watching the board. "If they die," he shifted, sensing the tide, "we can't pivot based on a janitor's doodle." Rosa capped her marker with a click that sounded like a gavel. "Then don't pivot based on his doodle," she said. "Pivot based on the science that matches it." Clara looked at Liam. Really looked. "Why do you know this?" she asked, soft enough it felt like a secret. "He breathed once, because I listen," he said, "to rain to roots to what fails when we're proud." Silence again. In TTS, that line would hang in a room. It did more. It landed. Clara straightened. Decisions settled across her like a coat. "Here's what we'll do." She set a pilot plot. 48 hours. You choose the species and layout. If it works, if it shows the promise you're asking me to bet the company on, we talk about scale. She turned to Martin. "You'll facilitate." Martin's smile didn't reach anything important. "Of course." Clara faced Liam. "Can you do it?" Liam felt the old fear surge, a tide he had learned to ride by letting it pass through. He thought of Eli's small hands in soil on the rooftop of camper trees, thirsting for a sun that wasn't theirs, of a city that might be kinder if someone just stopped lying to its ground. "Yes," he said. "Good," Clara replied, and there was something like warmth in it, though she hid it well. "Mr. Brooks, Liam, don't make me regret this." He nodded. "I won't." They filed out. In the corridor, the murmur of the gala rose again, a polite ocean. Harper Lane leaned against the wall, jotting something in a notebook she hadn't asked permission to have. "Well," she asked. Clara didn't break stride. "Off the record," Harper grinned. "Those are my 3 favorite words." Liam reached for his radio. "Ralph, I'm headed to the rooftop. Figured Ralph answered already, told security to give you access." "And Brooks?" "Yeah." Ralph paused as if choosing a tool from a crowded box. "Sometimes the right mess saves the day." Liam smiled despite himself. "Copy that." He pushed through the stairwell door, the hum of the building in his bones. 2 flights up the exit to the roof banged open against a gust. Rain tapped his face like an old friend. He stood alone with the city and the noise of its weather, and felt the weight of 2 days fall onto his shoulders like a pack he'd carried before and sworn he wouldn't pick up again. Below him, in a room of glass he had made invisible, a woman with a careful watch had bet on a janitor. Above him, the clouds thickened as if the sky itself were holding its breath. Liam lifted his hood, set his jaw, and walked into the rain. "Dad, why do you look like you're about to wrestle a bear?" Eli's voice was small but pointed, drifting through the warm steam of the rooftop greenhouse. The rain pattered against the glass panels above them, each drop tapping out a rhythm older than the city below. Liam straightened from the planter bed, his gloves muddy to the wrists. "I'm just thinking," he said, shaking off the dirt. "About the next 48 hours? You mean the 48 hours where you're going to prove the entire planet wrong?" Eli grinned his missing front tooth, making the words even bolder. Liam couldn't help but laugh low, almost tired. Something like that. The rooftop garden was their refuge. A few raised beds, a collection of native plants they'd coaxed back to life from scraps and seeds. In the far corner, the red osier dogwood they'd planted 2 years ago flamed against the gray sky, its branches wet and vivid. Eli crouched beside a pot of sword ferns, tracing the fronds with one finger. "Why don't you just tell them everything you know? Then it'd be easy." Liam pulled off his gloves, flexing his stiff fingers. "Because knowing and being heard aren't the same thing." Eli frowned. That's dumb. Yeah, Liam said softly. It is. He turned away before Eli could see the shadows settle on his face. Shadows, with roots of their own stretching back 5 years. It had been the smell that haunted him first. The wet, metallic tang of the river after the storm's surge. The air so thick with pine sap it clung to his throat. And the roar not of water itself, but of everything the water was tearing away. They'd been out on a research trip, Hannah and him, cataloging post-fire regrowth along a steep ravine. She'd been ahead of him, camera swinging from her neck hair plastered to her cheek in the rain. One moment she was smiling back at him about to say something. The next, the slope gave way beneath her boots. There are sounds you never forget. The tearing earth, her gasp. The hollow silence when you realize the person you love has been taken in a way that does not allow for bargaining. The investigation report had called it an unavoidable act of nature, but the local news found someone to blame. That someone was him, the team leader, the one who chose the site. He remembered sitting in the hearing room, the committee's voices clipped and careful. We don't find negligence, Mr. Brooks, but we do find misjudgment. That word was the death of his career, not because it was true, but because it could fit in a headline. And so he'd left. Left the labs, the grants, the speaking invitations, left the name, Dr. Liam Brooks, in a drawer somewhere, and put on the uniform of a man who didn't need to be asked his opinion. Dad. Eli's hand was on his sleeve. You spaced out again, Liam. Blinked. The sword fern was back in front of him, not the river. Sorry, buddy. He ruffled Eli's hair. Guess I was remembering. About Mom, he hesitated. Yeah, about Mom. Eli nodded in that way kids do when they're too young for all the words, but old enough to know the shape of them. She'd like this place, he said. The garden, I mean. She would, Liam murmured. She really would. Downstairs, West Corp Tower was still humming from the gala. Liam had avoided the main floors all day. Didn't want to hear Martin's voice carrying over the lobby like a man rehearsing his own praise. But by late afternoon, Rosa appeared at the rooftop door, hair damp from the drizzle, a file folder clutched to her chest. You're hard to find, she said. That's on purpose. She stepped inside, letting the door close behind her. I thought you might want to see this. She handed him the folder. Inside were schematics, plant delivery schedules, invoices, and anatomy of the Emerald Park project in black and white. You're just handing me company documents, Liam asked, eyebrows raised. I'm handing you the truth, Rosa said. You were right about the survival rates, and it's worse than you think. Some of these species already have root rot from shipping. Liam exhaled slowly. You could get fired for this. I could, she agreed. But if this project fails, the city loses faith in every green space proposal for the next decade. And I didn't become a landscape architect to watch ornamental imports die in a month. He studied her for a moment. You're braver than you look. Rosa smiled faintly. You're braver than you act. The rooftop door opened again, letting in a sharper gust of wind, and with it, Harper Lane. She had a camera bag slung over one shoulder and the half-smirk of someone who didn't mind being somewhere uninvited. Am I crashing a party? She asked. This isn't a party, Liam said. Good, Harper replied, because I hate parties, but I love watching men like Martin Cole squirm, and after today's little exchange, I think you've got him sweating. Liam crossed his arms. If you're here for a quote, I'm here to tell you that if you pull this off, you won't need a quote. The pictures will speak louder than anything. Harper glanced around the greenhouse. This your test lab? Something like that. Then make it count, she said. People are tired of being sold pretty lies. Give them something alive. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. And Brooks, whatever happens, don't let them turn you into the story. Let the garden be the story. That's how you win. After they'd gone, the silence settled heavy. Liam looked at Eli, who was busy coaxing a slug off the side of a pot. "You believe I can do this?" he asked. Eli didn't look up. "You already do it every day. You just do it in secret." Liam smiled. Leave it to a 10-year-old to state the obvious, like a prophecy. That night, rain slicked the streets below into ribbons of light. From the rooftop, the city felt both infinite and small. Every building another puzzle of steel and ambition. Liam stood at the edge, hands in his jacket pockets, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. He thought of Clara West, her eyes calculating, and cautious the way she'd said, "Don't make me regret this." He thought of Martin's smirk, of Rosa's resolve, of Harper's warning. And he thought of Hannah, her voice in the rain, telling him once, "You can't change the weather, Liam, but you can choose what you plant in it." The clock had started 48 hours. He turned toward the greenhouse where Eli's laughter echoed against the glass, bright and stubborn against the storm. "All right," Liam murmured to himself. "Let's give them something that wants to live here." And for the first time in years, the thought didn't feel like a risk. It felt like coming home. Rosa Kim stared at the blank of her studio wall until the white felt loud. The city hummed beyond her apartment windows. Sirens somewhere far, a fairy horn breathing across the water, the soft hiss of rain on asphalt. On the drafting table, 3 sharpened pencils, a scale ruler, and the plant lists. She couldn't unsee. She sketched because that was how she prayed. Lines became pathways, shaded circles became groves. She placed aldervine, maple sword, fern salal, each where it wanted to live, not where a brochure wanted it photographed. Her phone buzzed. "Mom, you're still at the office. Rosa, home, working. Mom, work shouldn't eat you." Rosa smiled, thumb hovering. "Sometimes you have to let work eat you before it eats the city," she almost wrote. "Instead, I'll sleep soon." She didn't. At midnight, she threw on a raincoat and walked the 4 blocks to West Corp Tower. Security knew her by now. The night guard lifted the gate with a nod, burning the candle. "Ms. Kim," she lifted a thermos. Double wicked. The elevator climbed through the spine of the building like a thought that wouldn't end. The rooftop greenhouse greeted her with fogged glass and the leathery perfume of wet leaves. The beds Liam and Eli tended were modest but stubbornly alive. A kind of quiet proof. She ran her fingers along a salmonberry cane, checking the buds. Not fancy. "Right, Miss Kim," a voice in the doorway. Ralph stood there, hands in pockets. Didn't expect company. "I needed to see something that still tells the truth," Rosa said. He nodded like a man who had learned which screws hold a world view together. "Truth doesn't mind being looked at," he said. "Lies get jumpy." "Is Mr. Brooks here?" she asked. "Went home," Ralph said. "He'll be back at dawn. He and the kid." Rosa breathed out through her nose. The glass roof ticked with rain. 48 hours, she murmured. Feels like a miracle and a trap. Ralph tilted his head. Depends who sets it. Morning came, dressed in mist. At 7:12 a.m., Rosa stood outside Clara West's office with a folder tucked to her ribs. She rehearsed sentences that kept dissolving into smoke. Clara waved her in. The CEO's office smelled faintly of cedar and black coffee, like a new house that wanted to live up to its promise. The horizon behind her was a sheet of pewter. Clara didn't sit. She moved like a conductor in a hard-won tempo. "You have something," Clara said, not a question. "2 things," Rosa replied, and felt the steadiness land in her own voice. "A design adjustment that matches our ecology, and an ethical problem that could drown us." Clara's gaze was all attention. "Now go on." Rosa laid out a sketch, the pilot plot Liam had described, simplified into zones. "We can make a forest that behaves like itself. It reduces maintenance by partnering with natural succession instead of fighting it. It's beautiful because it belongs." Clara studied the lines and the problem. Rosa slid a second document forward. Shipping logs photos. Leaves gone the wrong color. soil bags labeled with Latin names that didn't match the invoices. Imports arrived stressed, some already infected. If we plant them to meet a deadline, we're signing up for a funeral in slow motion. And she swallowed. There's a vendor relationship Mr. Cole didn't disclose. Silence settled like dust in a sunbeam. Clara's face didn't move. Her eyes did quick as reading a terrain. "Are you certain?" Clara asked. "Certain enough to be afraid?" Rosa said. Something unlatched in Clara's expression, an almost invisible admission. "I am afraid too." Then the door opened without a knock. Martin Cole stepped in with a smile that wore its shoes on the furniture. Clara Martin said, "I've got updated timelines from procurement. We can accelerate landscaping by O." He noticed Rosa the papers. "Is this show and tell?" "Close the door," Clara said. He did. "Everything all right?" Rosa met his eyes because fear feeds on looking away. "We have an infection risk and a compliance gap." Martin chuckled. We're building a park gap, which means plants get shipped. Plants get cranky plants. Perk up. It happens. Don't catastrophize. Then authorize a third-party test." Rosa said, "We quarantine the shipments. Switch species lists for the first wave. We have a schedule." Ms. Kim Martin said soft enough to be a threat. "Today's new cycle will not pause for fern feelings." Clara held up a hand. "Enough. We'll test quietly and the pilot proceeds. If the pilot demonstrates viability, we consider a species pivot at scale." Martin's smile didn't crack. It calcified. "A pivot at this stage is cheaper than a scandal." Clara finished. "I'm not paying for a cemetery." He shifted. "You want a cemetery? Let our janitor run the show." Rosa felt heat rise at her neck. She glanced at Clara, who looked at Martin as if she were measuring the weight of his words against the floor that had to hold them. "We're done here," Clara said. "Rosa, coordinate with Liam. Martin, get me testing options by noon and Martin. Knock next time." When he left, the air recalibrated. Clara's voice lowered. "Thank you," she said to Rosa, "for bringing this to me here and not out there." Rosa swallowed. "The city deserves a win. So do you." "So do you," Clara said, and for a moment the CEO disappeared, and a daughter who had watched a mother fade stood in her place. Then it was gone. "Go build me something that doesn't lie." By 10, Rosa was at the nursery warehouse on the edge of the industrial district. Harper Lane materialized from between pallets like a rumor with a press pass. "Thought I might find you here," Harper said, lifting her camera. "Mind if I look where I'm not invited?" "If you already asked permission," Rosa said. "You're late." Harper grinned. "You get me?" Rows of saplings slept under plastic. Some didn't know they were sleeping. They were trying to die politely. Harper knelt and lifted a leaf. "This is the color of a story that ends badly," she said. Rosa pointed to a tag. "See the Latin? It doesn't match the invoice. These were substituted." "Cheap cousins," Harper said. "Happens when someone gets a kickback to wink at labels." "Don't say that yet," Rosa murmured. "Not out loud." Harper lowered the camera. "I don't publish ghosts. I publish proof." She nodded toward a side office. "This vendor's been cited twice for quarantine. Violations. You didn't hear it from me." "I didn't," Rosa said, though she had. They walked between pallets, rain drumming the roof like a deadline. Rosa felt the ache of choosing. Blow the whistle and risk the project. Stay quiet and risk its soul. Liam's sketch from last night lived in her pocket like a heartbeat she could touch. Harper stopped at the loading bay. "You know," she said, "cities don't just get built with steel and money. They get built with the small courage of people who aren't paid enough to have any." She slung the camera. "Find me when the pilot blooms. I'll make it famous." "That's not why we're doing this," Rosa said. "I know," Harper replied. "That's why." It'll work. At noon, Rosa returned to the rooftop. Liam was already there. Sleeves rolled soil under his nails. Eli in a rain slicker 2 sizes too big, handing him steaks like a nurse with scalpels. "Hey, Ms. Kim," Eli called. "We're making a forest that wants to be here." "That's the plan," Rosa said, and something unclenched in her chest at the certainty in his voice. She showed Liam the notes the sketch refined. He read quickly, eyes flitting, filling in blanks with his own quiet mind. "You went to the nursery," he said. "I saw enough to lose sleep," she replied. "Sleep later," he said, and the way he said it made the fear move aside for a moment. "Right now, we plant honesty." Eli drove a stake into the wet soil with a small, triumphant grunt. "Dad says forests are communities," he announced. "They share food underground. People should try that." Rosa laughed. "He's not wrong." Liam looked at her, rain beating on his lashes. "Clara on board." "She's on the edge," Rosa said. But she stepped toward us. "That's all anyone ever does," Liam murmured. "Step or don't." Rosa opened her folder, pulled out a photo of Hannah smiling in a field, Liam's arm around her shoulders. She hadn't meant to bring it, but she had found it in an old article last night. It had followed her eyes. "Is this okay?" she asked, offering it gently. He took it like a fragile relic. The storm shifted across his face. Pain, then something like weathered light. "Where did you—" "The internet remembers more than it forgives," Rosa said softly. "I'm sorry if you want me to." "It's all right," he said, and his voice was a grain rougher. He tucked the photo inside his jacket. She loved rain. He faced the plot. "Let's make it mean something." They worked. Not a montage so much as a litany dig set back-filled tamp. Eli read species names like spells, Rosa's pencil tucked behind her ear hair escaping its pins. Liam's instructions were spare and precise, 2 feet further. Give the roots a conversation, not a fight. At one point, Rosa asked, "What do you call this approach if someone needs a headline?" Liam stood, hands on hips, breath fogging the air. "Common sense," he said. Then after a beat, "But if you need poetry, call it letting the land remember itself." She stared at him. "You do know you sound like a man who used to have microphones." "I used to have one," he admitted. "It taught me I prefer plants. They listened better. They laughed, and the laugh held." By late afternoon, the pilot plot looked like a promise someone might actually keep. The rain softened to a mist. Rosa took photos from angles that told the truth without needing captions. Her phone buzzed. "A message from Clara board meets at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Update me at 7:30. Quietly, Rosa typed back, "We'll be ready." She looked over the city, the freighters like sleeping whales, the cranes holding still like prayers. Beside her, Liam wiped his hands, and Eli leaned into his father's side, damp and proud. Miss Kim, Eli said, "Do you think grown-ups will stop laughing at us now?" Rosa crouched to his height. "Grown-ups laugh when they're scared," she said. "But gardens have a way of changing the conversation." He thought about that, then nodded as if he decided to keep it. Rosa stood. The doubt was still there. It would be until dawn, but it didn't own the room anymore. Choice did, and she had made hers. Downstairs, Martin was probably drafting talking points. Harper was probably sharpening a headline. Clara would be twisting her watch, weighing futures. Up here, in a rectangle of honest soil, on a roof that had learned to hold more than weather, 3 people planted something that refused to be a lie. 40 hours, Liam said, glancing at his watch. Rosa capped the last stake. "Let's make every one of them tell the truth." By the time Clara West stepped into the executive boardroom, the rain outside had thickened into needles. Each drop struck the Tower's glass with a muted percussion like the city itself was tapping to be let in. The 12 members of West Corp's board were already seated around the long walnut table. Martin Cole sat near the head posture impeccable tie, nodded like it had something to prove. The only empty chair was hers. "Ms. West," said Harold Benton, the board's senior member, his voice as dry as the legal contracts in his briefcase. "We've all read the reports from yesterday's press event." Clara took her seat without breaking eye contact. "Then you know public interest is high." "High isn't always good," Benton replied. "The incident with your janitor, his name is Liam Brooks," Clara cut in. "And it wasn't an incident. It was a suggestion." "Suggestions," Martin said smoothly, "are welcome in the proper channels, but being contradicted in front of the press undermines our credibility." Clara turned toward him. "Credibility is keeping your promises. If our trees die, no headline will save us." Martin's lips curved in a way that looked like a smile but wasn't. "Our suppliers assure me the imports will adapt." "Adaptation isn't magic," Clara replied. "It's compatibility, which is why we're running a pilot plot." Murmurs rippled through the room. Benton's brow rose. "A pilot?" At this stage, Martin seized the opening. "Yes, at this stage, after contracts have been signed, shipments scheduled, and marketing campaigns launched." "Ms. West, the budget is not an accordion. It is," Clara said, "when the alternative is spending millions on a park-shaped graveyard." That line silenced even the air conditioning. Clara scanned the room, letting her words settle. "Emerald Park," she continued, "is more than a project. It's a statement. Seattle is trusting us to deliver something that breathes. If we fail, we don't just lose money. We lose the public's faith. And I won't gamble that for the sake of pretending we can't adjust." Across the table, Martin leaned back. "And whose design? Will this pilot follow?" "Janitors." "Yes," Clara said simply with oversight from our landscape architect, Ms. Kim. "That's irregular," Benton said. "So is hiring a man with no degree in public relations and finding out he might be the one person who can keep our forest alive," Clara countered. A younger board member, Sarah Tran, spoke up for the first time. "If the pilot fails, we lose time and face. But if it succeeds, we have a solution and a story, one that aligns with sustainability, a narrative investors like." Martin's jaw tightened. "We're not in the business of making heroes out of maintenance staff." Clara's voice cooled. "We're in the business of making Emerald Park real. If a maintenance worker happens to save it, then maybe the hero story isn't the problem. It's the fact we didn't listen sooner. No one moved for a long beat." Then Benton sighed as though dragging the decision out of his own bones. "Very well. 48 hours, then we reconvene." "For now," Clara said. She stood. "We'll update you at the next meeting." As the board members filed out, Martin stayed behind. "Clara, may I have a word?" "You just had several," she said without looking up from her tablet. "This pilot is a mistake," he pressed. "If it works, you'll have validated an outsider over your own team. If it fails, you'll be the one holding the shovel at the funeral." Clara met his gaze. "If it works, we save the project. If it fails, we learn something we couldn't afford not to know. Either way, Martin, the only funeral I'm worried about is for our credibility, and you're the one digging that hole if you keep dismissing science for convenience." His nostrils flared, but he said nothing. When the door clicked shut behind him, Clara allowed herself one slow exhale. Downstairs in the operations wing, Rosa was knee-deep in procurement forms when Clara appeared. In the doorway. "How's the pilot coming?" Clara asked. Rosa brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "Liam's on the roof with Eli. They're laying out the first row now." "Good," Clara said. She hesitated. "Mim, thank you for not letting this slide." Rosa allowed herself a small smile. "Some things are worth risking the noise." Clara nodded, then glanced at the plan spread across Rosa's desk. "Looks like more than noise to me." By late afternoon, the rain had eased into a silver mist. Clara stepped out onto the rooftop and found Liam bent over a plot, pressing soil around a young vine maple. Eli hovered nearby, clutching a bucket of mulch like it was treasure. "You're ahead of schedule," Clara observed. Liam straightened, brushing dirt from his gloves. "Forests don't wait for permission. They grow when the season says so." She crossed her arms. "And what does this season say?" "That we have just enough time if no one wastes it," Liam replied. For a moment, they stood in the soft hiss of the mist, the city skyline blurred behind them. Clara glanced at Eli, who was now humming to the saplings. "Does he always talk to plants?" she asked. Liam's mouth lifted. "Only the ones we want to keep." Clara let a chuckle slip before she caught herself. "The board gave us 40 hours. Make them count." He met her eyes steady. "I will, but remember, plants don't grow on deadlines. They grow on trust." Something about this way he said it lodged in her chest. She turned away before it could take root. That evening, as the city lights began to scatter themselves across the wet streets, Clara stood in her office looking down at Emerald Park's construction site. She imagined the imported saplings arriving perfect in photographs, doomed in reality. She imagined the pilot plot on the roof green with possibility. Her father's voice surfaced from some deep, uninvited place. "You win deals by making the other side believe you've already won," she whispered to the empty room. "Maybe sometimes you win by admitting you haven't." At nearly midnight, the boardroom was dark, except for the blue glow of the city outside. Martin sat alone, scrolling through emails on his phone. One message caught his eye, an update from the nursery vendor marked confidential. He read it twice, his mouth tightening. Then he typed a reply, fingers moving quickly. "Proceed as discussed. Keep this between us." When he hit send, the reflection in the glass caught his face. Not the polished project director, but a man who knew the storm in the boardroom was only beginning. The morning broke without sunlight, just that pale Seattle light that couldn't decide if it wanted to be day. Mist curled off the streets, the air smelling faintly of salt from the sound. Clara West stepped out of the executive elevator and followed the narrow service hall to the rooftop access. She didn't entirely know why she was there. CEOs didn't drop in on janitors mid-project, but after last night's boardroom storm sleep, had refused her. Something about the way Liam Brooks had stood there calm in the chaos, refusing to oversell himself, lingered like the taste of black coffee. When she pushed open the door to the roof, the smell hit her first fresh earth-wet cedar, the quiet green of possibility. Liam was on his knees in the soil, showing Eli how to loosen the root ball of a young red-flowering currant without tearing it. "Roots are like people," Liam was saying. "They need room to breathe, but they also need someone next to them who won't steal all the light." Eli grinned. "So, you mean like good neighbors?" "Exactly," Liam said, glancing up as he heard the door. "Morning, Miss West." Clara stepped closer, heels sinking slightly into the damp gravel. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "You're not interrupting," Eli said, beaming. "We're planting a forest." Clara crouched near the planter bed, careful not to brush the soil onto her coat. "What's this one?" she asked, nodding toward the sapling in Liam's hands. "Currant," Liam replied. "Native feeds hummingbirds, likes the company of Douglas firs." He paused, then added, "It'll bloom in spring, bright pink, gives the city a reminder that winter isn't forever." There was something in the way he said it, like he wasn't just talking about the plant. Clara looked at the neat rows he'd already planted. "I've been to gardens all over the world, and yet this," she gestured at the rooftop, "feels different, less staged." "That's because it's not trying to impress you," Liam said. "It's trying to belong." For a moment, neither of them moved. Eli broke the stillness, pulling Clara gently toward another bed. "Come see the sword ferns. Dad says they're like the quiet kids in class, always watching, always ready to grow when no one's looking." Clara smiled despite herself. And do you talk to all your plants? Only the ones I want to keep alive, Eli said, echoing his father's line from yesterday. Liam shot him a look. You've been stealing my material. Yep, Eli said proudly. Clara laughed an unguarded, almost surprised sound. Maybe I should start talking to my board like that. They might grow better, Liam said dryly. Her smile lingered, then faded just enough for the business in her to return. You know, when the board signed off on this project, they were thinking of photo ops, ribbon cutings, and magazine spreads. Not, she gestured to the plain, honest greenery. Then they were thinking about the wrong kind of legacy, Liam replied. Pretty dies. Belonging lasts. She tilted her head, studying him. You really believe that? He met her gaze without flinching. It's the only thing I believe. They moved along the rows, Liam explaining which plants would form the canopy, which would knit the soil, and which would bring pollinators. Clara listened more than she spoke. It had been a long time since she'd listened without planning her reply. At one point, she asked, How do you know what works together? He wiped his hands on his jeans. You spend enough time in the field, you start to see relationships. Plants talk, not like us, but in water, in shade, in the way they share nutrients through the soil. A forest is just a neighborhood that's been negotiating for 1,000 years. That's poetic, she said. It's practical, he corrected. Poetry is just what happens when the truth fits in your chest. The line hung there as if even the mist didn't. Want to move it? Eli tugged at Clara's sleeve. Do you want to plant one? She hesitated. I'm not exactly dressed for gardening. So, take off your coat, Eli said matter-of-factly. The plants won't care what you wear. Liam tried not to smile. He's got a point. Clara sighed, slipping off the tailored coat and draping it over the railing. The cold air bited her through her blouse, but there was something freeing about kneeling in the soil, letting her hands sink into the dark living earth. Like this? She asked. Loosen it a bit more, Liam said, guiding her fingers. You want the roots to feel welcome, not trapped. She worked the soil, feeling the threads of root give way gently. I haven't done this since. She stopped. Since Liam, prompted voice soft, since my mother was alive, she admitted she used to keep a garden on our patio. She said it was the only thing she could control. Clara smiled faintly. Of course, I thought she meant weeds. And now I think she meant hope, Clara said quietly. Liam didn't reply, but the look in his eyes told her he understood exactly what she meant. They planted in silence for a while. When they finished, Clara brushed soil from her hands and reached for her coat. You'll need to sell this to the board, Liam said. I'll show them results, she replied. They'll either see it or they won't, but at least I'll know I backed something worth believing in. Liam nodded once. That's all any of us can do. Eli looked between them. So, does that mean you're friends now? Clara laughed again, softer this time. I think it means we're on the same side. That's what friends are, Eli said. Liam ruffled his son's hair. Go wash up, bud. As Eli disappeared toward the stairwell, Clara lingered a moment longer, her gaze sweeping the neat rows. You know, if this works, it could change how the city sees green space, not just as decoration, but as part of who we are. Liam's voice was quiet, but certain. It will work, because we're giving it the one thing no budget can buy: time. She looked at him, then really looked, and for the briefest second the air between them felt different. Not warmer exactly, just less guarded. I'll see you tomorrow, Mr. Brooks, she said, slipping her coat back on. Liam, he corrected. She paused, the corners of her mouth lifting. Liam. The door closed behind her, leaving him alone with the hum of the city and the whisper of leaves in the damp air. He stood there a moment longer, letting the mist settle on his skin, thinking about how some roots take hold quietly until one day they're the only thing keeping the soil from washing away. The first sign was the smell, then sour, then wrong. Rosa caught it before she saw the leaves. She stepped into the nursery's holding warehouse just after dawn, and the air hit her like a lie. Plastic-wrapped pallets lined the concrete like a small army, waiting to be told where to die. Dew sweated on the inside of the sheeting. Condensation dripped in slow, stubborn metronomes. She slid open the nearest wrap with her key. The saplings inside were beautiful in the way panic sometimes as glossy dark quiet, but the undersides of their leaves had turned a color that didn't belong to life. She pinched the soil at the root collar. It came away in a slick that didn't belong to soil at all. The foreman ambled over, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Morning, Ms. Kim. First truck came early imports from the Eastern supplier. We'll move them to site by noon." "Don't," Rosa said. He blinked. "Ma'am." She held up her fingers. The smell clung to them like a rumor. "Quarantine these. Every pallet now." He glanced toward the clipboard at his station. "But procurement doesn't get to negotiate with rot," Rosa said. "Tape off this bay. No movement without my call." She crouched at another pallet. Tugged the sapling free. The root ball told the rest of the story brown where it wanted to be white water logged where it wanted air. You were asked to hold your breath too long. She murmured to the plant, then to herself. "And now you can't remember how to breathe." Her phone buzzed. "Clara." Rosa answered without standing. "We have a problem. How big?" Clara's voice sharpened steel. "About 6 figures of inventory," Rosa said. "Maybe 7 if we pretend long enough. Root rot in the first shipment. A substituted species on 3 pallets. If we plant these, Emerald Park becomes a very expensive funeral." Silence. "Then can you prove it?" "I can show you," Rosa said, "but I want you to see something else first." "What? Why?" "This doesn't have to be a disaster," Rosa replied. "Come to the roof. Bring no one." Clara arrived 15 minutes later, rain beads clinging to the dark wool of her coat. Rosa was already on the rooftop, standing by the pilot plot like a lawyer about to rest her case. The city below them unrolled in pewter and glass. The mist had learned their names by now. Liam and Eli were there, too. Liam, with his sleeves, pushed up Eli in a rain slicker that made him look like a small lantern. The pilot plot was not dramatic. It simply looked right. The currents of air seemed to move more softly over it, as if respecting a place that finally belonged to itself. "What am I looking at?" Clara asked. "Endurance," Liam said. Rosa gestured. "Native canopy understory ground cover. The root systems. Complement instead of compete. Drainage paths in the soil strata. No imported theatrics. We're designing for survival, not headlines." Clara crouched, touching the damp leaf of a sal. "This feels real." "It is," Liam said. "Because it wants to be here." Rosa's eyes flicked to Clara's downstairs in the nursery. "Those trees don't, and if we pretend they do because a contract says so, we're the liars." Clara stood. "How many are bad? Enough to kill the story?" Rosa said. Eli tugged Clara's sleeve. "We don't plant sick friends," he said, solemn as a judge. Clara almost smiled. "Almost? We don't." A throat cleared. Martin Cole stepped onto the roof umbrella, snapping the air like a flag. "There you are," he said brightly, which meant he'd followed. "Them. Clara, procurement needs your sign-off for today's transfers. Trucks are scheduled. Photographers, too." "Cancel the photographers," Clara said without turning. Martin's smile thinned. "Pardon?" Rosa spoke before Clara could. "We have rot in the first shipment and substitutions. I've quarantined the bay. You've overstepped." Martin said tone, smooth edges serrated. "Your job is to get pretty trees and pretty dirt on time. Procurement handles the rest." "Pretty dies," Rosa said evenly. "Belonging lasts." Martin pivoted to Clara. We vetted these suppliers. Delays will cost us penalties. Press and patience. If a few plants need extra care, we can. They don't need care, Rosa cut in. They need a different climate and a different life, which you and our janitor will provide. Martin let the word hang like something that smelled bad. Liam didn't flinch. Plants don't read payrolls, he said. They read the rain. Martin ignored him. Clara with respect. I need your sign off. The public preview is 30 days out. If we miss it, we lose the window, and the city goes cold. You want that headline? Clara's gaze held on the pilot plot a heartbeat longer. Then she faced Martin. No trucks move until we test every pallet. Third-party lab today. His nostrils flared. That's not necessary. It is, Clara said, and the pilot proceeds quietly. If the tests clear, we reassess. If they don't, we pivot species. We plant what survives here. Martin's voice went softer, more dangerous. Clara, you're letting a maintenance worker and a junior architect rewire a project that defines our decade. You are gambling your name on a patch of dirt and a nice story. Clara's jaw set. I'm gambling my name on what tells the truth, Eli whispered. That's the good kind of bet. Martin turned to Rosa. You'll regret this. Rosa met his eyes. Only if I lie. He pivoted back to Clara. Sign the transfers. No. The word landed with the exact weight of authority. For a beat, the roof forgot to be cold. Martin's umbrella tilted, just enough to spill rain down his sleeve. He didn't blink. Understood, he said finally, voice flat. I'll draft a memo noting your decision and its associated risks. Good, Clara said. Include the risk of planting rot. He left without answering footsteps hard against the gravel. Harper Lane materialized at the stairwell with the quiet of a headline forming. That went almost friendly, she said. Were you? Clara started eavesdropping. Documenting civic courage, Harper said. She lifted her camera slightly, then lowered it. Off the record, Ms. West. The city forgives mistakes. It does not forgive pretending. Pick your sin. Clara exhaled fog, ghosting the air. I just did. Harper's grin flashed. I'll pretend I didn't see it. She vanished back down the stairs, already composing a story she swore she wouldn't write yet. Clara turned to Liam. If the lab confirms rot, can you replace the first wave fast? Enough? Not with imports, Liam said, but with natives. Yes, we can source from local nursery, smaller growers, even restoration groups. It won't look like a catalog. It'll look like home. Our contracts, Clara began. Contracts don't keep trees alive, Liam said gently. Soil does, and the people who don't force it to be something else. Rosa slipped a list into Clara's hand. Local. Suppliers. I've already called 3. They can help if we move now. Clara studied the names. Not glossy, not expensive, not performative. This will be messy, she said. Liam nodded. Right. Messes usually are. Eli looked up at Clara, rain purled on his eyelashes. We can help, he said, as if volunteering to carry a mountain. Clara knelt, ignoring the wet seeping through her skirt. You already are, she told him. Then to Liam, I gave you 48 hours. You just bought me a conscience. Don't make me regret it. I won't. He said, no bravado, just the kind of promise that knows how to shovel. Clara straightened the city's weight settling across her shoulders and, strangely, setting something free. Her phone buzzed. A message from Benton Status, another from Martin. Need decision on transfers now. A third from legal vendor penalties outlined. Urgent, she typed to Benton. Testing shipments. Pilot proceeding update 7:30 a.m. tomorrow to legal. Prepare pivot plan. We'll need it. To Martin, she wrote nothing. Silence would be the clearest sentence. She put the phone away. All right, she said to the 2 people who had just changed the shape of her morning. Show me exactly what you need. Liam pointed to the plot. Trust, he said. Then with a small, almost apologetic smile and a shovel, Clara reached for one, handed over. They worked in the rain. CEO, janitor, architect, and a boy who believed in plants like other kids believed in superheroes. The mist lifted and fell a curtain waiting for its cue. Somewhere below, emails multiplied like mushrooms after a storm. Up here, roots touched soil and remembered their lines. By the time the lab truck pulled into the loading bay to swab the first pallet, Rosa's quarantine tape fluttered like a warning the wind had decided to honor. Martin watched from the mezzanine, fists deep in his pockets. A small, brittle smile plastered on, as if it could keep the forecast from being what it was. And in the pilot plot, a single hummingbird arrowed out of the gray to hover over the red flowering current as if to say I was invited. It dipped, tasted, and stayed. Clara felt something unclench inside her. She didn't call it hope. Not yet. She called it oxygen. Tomorrow, she said more to herself than to them. Tomorrow we find out what we're brave enough to admit. Tomorrow, Liam echoed. Eli squeezed his father's hand. And tomorrow, he added with the certainty only 10-year-olds own. We grow. The email hit Clara's inbox just after sunrise. Lab results. Positive for Phytothera. Root rot. 47% of tested inventory compromised. Recommend full disposal. She stared at the words until they blurred. 47% was not just a bad number. It was a death sentence for any PR campaign that relied on glossy images and grand openings. And there were still 30 days until the public preview. Her phone rang before she could move. Rosa's name lit the screen. You saw the results. Rosa's voice was low-clipped. I saw them, Clara replied. Martin's going to bury it. He'll say it's within acceptable loss. Clara's jaw tightened. There's nothing acceptable about planting. Disease. Rosa hesitated, then said, Liam has a plan. On the rooftop, the mist was heavier than usual, clinging to her hair as she stepped into the pilot plot. Liam was kneeling by the red flowering current, Eli beside him with a battered notebook. You read the report? Liam asked without looking up. I did. He patted the soil around the plant. Then you know we don't have the luxury of time. You have 48 hours left of your pilot, she reminded him. Not anymore, he said, standing. Now we have 30 days to replace every compromised tree before the preview. And if we wait until the board agrees on a plan, it'll be 30 hours too late. She crossed her arms. Replacing nearly half the inventory in 30 days is impossible. Then we don't replace them, Liam said. We rebuild from the ground up, literally. Local growers, native stock, smaller suppliers who can move fast because they don't have to import from across the country. Contracts she started can be renegotiated. The soil won't wait, Liam cut in. Every day we delay is another inch the rot spreads. This isn't a choice between expensive and cheap. It's between alive and dead. Eli looked up from his notebook. Dad says plants are like people. If you put sick ones too close, everyone catches it. Clara's eyes softened for a moment. He's not wrong. An hour later, they were in Clara's office with Rosa and Harper. The rain streaked the windows in diagonal lines. Rosa had a spreadsheet open, names of local nurseries highlighted in green. These are all within 100 miles, Rosa said. Some are restoration groups, nonprofits that grow native species for ruing projects. If we can pay them fair market and guarantee pickup, they'll clear entire greenhouses for us. Harper leaned back in her chair. The optics of this could be gold if you survive the board's outrage, community-sourced park sustainable plants, local economy boost. The press will eat it up. Clara gave her a flat look. We're not doing this for optics. Of course not, Harper said lightly. But if the story helps keep Martin from strangling the budget in its crib, you might want it in your back pocket. Clara turned to Liam. How fast can you coordinate deliveries? If we start today, the first wave of natives could be here in 72 hours, he said. but I need access to the staging area, and I need Martin out of my way." "That last part might be harder," Clara muttered. They didn't have to wait long to find out. Martin intercepted Clara outside the elevator. His smile was polite enough to be dangerous. "I've read the report," he said. "Yes, some inventory is compromised. Yes, we'll remove the worst of it. No, we will not scrap nearly $500,000 in product because a janitor wants to play gardener. Martin, this project is about vision," he pressed on. "And vision requires commitment. We don't pivot every time someone panics over a bad batch." "This isn't a bad batch," Clara said, stepping closer. "It's systemic contamination, and I'm not planting rot into the city's soil just to keep your delivery schedule." His eyes narrowed. "You'll bankrupt the project." "I'll save it," she countered. "We're sourcing locally, effective immediately." Martin's laugh was short and credulous. "Do you have any idea what kind of chaos you're inviting? No contracts, no volume guarantees, no disease," Clara snapped. "That's the point," he shook his head. "The board won't approve it." "They don't have to," she said, and walked away. By mid-afternoon, Liam was in the staging area with Ralph ticking off crates from a new manifest. Rosa moved between them, clipboard in hand, her ponytail damp with rain. "These are from a grower in Olympia," she said. "They've been cultivating Douglas fir and vine maple for reforestation. Perfect match for the canopy layer." Eli trotted up holding a pot with a tiny sprig. "Dad, look." He said, "This one's from a seed that fell in the wind. It just decided to grow here." Liam took the pot, turning it gently in his hands. "That's how we do this," he said quietly. "We plant what chooses to be here." That night, Clara stayed in her office long after the building emptied. The rain had stopped leaving the streets below, slick and gleaming. She watched the pilot plot's live camera feed. Rosa had set it up earlier. In the glow of rooftop lights, Liam was still working, moving between rows, adjusting stakes, his silhouette patient and deliberate. Her phone buzzed. "A message from Benton Board wants status update tomorrow. Bring numbers and be prepared to defend this pivot." She replied, "I'll bring results." She set the phone down and whispered to the empty room, "Alive or dead? That's the only number that matters." On the rooftop, Liam straightened from the last planter and looked over the city. The skyline glittered in the dark like someone had scattered seeds of light. Eli was asleep in a chair nearby, a blanket tucked around him. Rosa approached, rubbing her arms against the chill. "We've got less than 30 days, she said. Liam nodded. "Then we make every day count." She looked at him for a moment. "You think we can pull this off?" He smiled faintly. "Forests don't grow because they think they can. They grow because they have to. And somewhere deep in the soil, the first roots of a new plan began to take hold. They called it a site walk, but it felt like a trial. Cameras clustered against the construction fencing. Donors in raincoats clutched branded umbrellas. 2 city council members tucked themselves beneath a shared awning like verdicts waiting to happen. The skeletal paths of Emerald Park cut across the mud arteries without a heartbeat. Clara West stepped onto the gravel with the posture of someone who had decided not to flinch. To her right, Martin Cole, immaculate, his expression rehearsed. To her left, Rosa Kim clipboard under a clear sleeve. Further back, Harper Lane camera warm in her hands. And just behind the cordon, Liam and Eli, father and son in work jackets, faces steady against the mist. "Thank you for coming," Martin announced, his voice calibrated for microphones. "We're excited to share Emerald Park's progress. Despite a minor inventory setback, we remain on schedule to deliver a truly world-class green space." Harper murmured, to her lens just loud enough for the mic she wasn't supposed to have. World-class funerals are still funerals. A donor in a yellow slicker raised a hand. "What about the report on contaminated stock?" "Handled," Martin said smoothly. We've quarantined selective pallets. The remaining inventory is... Rosa cleared her throat. Nearly half was compromised. We're pivoting to native species sourced locally, murmurs. The councilwoman's eyebrow tilted. Locally? At this scale? In 30 days? That's the question, Martin said, turning the crowd like a stage. And perhaps our resident critic can answer. He gestured toward the fence where Liam stood rain-purling on his hood. Mr. Brooks, isn't it? If you're so certain, our plan is doomed. He lifted his chin, savoring the cue. If you're so smart, fix it now. The phrase hung in the damp air like a dare signed in ink. Clara opened her mouth, then shut it. This was the moment, and trying to cushion it would only bruise it. She turned to Liam. Mr. Brooks, she said, voice clear. What would you do right now to prove that this pivot isn't just theory? Liam stepped forward to the temporary gate. Ralph popped the latch and let him through as if that had always been the plan. Liam surveyed the site, graded earth, standing water, the ghost of a future pavilion. He pointed to a muddy rectangle near the south path. There, he said, Give me that quadrant. I'll build a living proof 48 hours. No imports, no theatrics. What? Belongs here arranged to cooperate? Martin laughed a single note with teeth. 48 hours to build a forest. Be serious. Liam didn't look at him. Forests are slow. Trust isn't. You don't need a cathedral in 2 days. You need a heartbeat. The councilman crossed his arms. What's the deliverable? We can count. I like trees. Voters like numbers. Survival. Percentage, Liam said. Soil infiltration after rainfall. Insect activity, early songbird interest if we're lucky, and something you can't count. But you'll feel coherence. Clara studied him. He had stopped selling himself before he began. Oddly, it made people lean in. What do you need? She asked. Access to the quadrant, authorization to redirect crews, delivery priority for native stock, volunteers, he said, glancing at the gathered donors and city staff. People who want to build something that doesn't lie. The donors shifted, unsure if they were being asked for money or themselves. Harper stepped forward. I'll live stream the build, she said, raising her phone. No spin, no soundtrack. Seattle can watch a park get made like a pot of honest soup, Martin hissed. Absolutely not. Clara lifted a hand. Do it. She turned to the group. 48 hours. We reconvene on this quadrant at noon 2 days from now. If the pilot fails, we own it. If it works, we scale. Either way, the city sees the truth. The councilwoman studied Clara like a chessboard, then nodded once. Well, be here. Martin's jaw worked. Logistics will be a nightmare. Nightmares teach you what you fear, Clara said. Get me the crews. He swallowed anger behind a professional smile. Of course. Eli tugged Liam's sleeve, eyes bright. Dad, can I? You're already part of it, Liam said. Harper panned to him. Kid got a message for Seattle. Eli considered. Yeah, he said finally. If you plant the right friends next to each other, nobody has to try so hard. Harper grinned. That's a pull quote. Rosa rolled her shoulders, cracked the tension like ice. Okay, she said, switching gears. We're burning light. The clock began the way all real clocks do, with hands, not numbers. Ralph rerouted crews. You heard the boss, Dirt? Here, gravel there. Let's make a mess on purpose. Rosa staked the quadrant into patient geometry. Paths here, swales there. We let the rain do half the work. Clara shed her blazer and took a shovel. A donor gasped. A city staffer smiled without meaning to. Harper went live. Seattle, she said to thousands of screens. Watch this. No music, no voiceover, just people trying to tell the ground the truth. Trucks arrived smaller than the glossy deliveries from before, but quicker, as if the plants themselves were eager. Crates of sword ferns from a Bainbridge nonprofit, flats of salal from a restoration group in Olympia, sapling Douglas firs, vine maples, red flowering currant, Oregon grape, kakinic like green lace. Liam directed with a field leader economy. Ferns, along the shaded edge. Bring the firs upwind to break the gusts. Maples in pairs give them a conversation. Swales 4 in deeper. We want the first rain to learn where to go. Why swee lales? The donor asked, holding a rake wrong and meaning well. So the water lingers, Liam said. Thirsty parks are loud, healthy parks are quiet. Harper's chat went feral with hearts. And who is this guy? And I want to live in a neighborhood that negotiates like his forest. As dusk fell, portable floodlights washed the quadrant in clean white. The city's glow answered in the distance. Coffee appeared in paper cups. So did pizza from a shop that didn't ask for an invoice. A violinist from the symphony stopped on her bike and ended up planting ferns in concert black. A bus driver on break grabbed a shovel. The foreman from the nursery came to watch and quietly slipped Rosa a list of other honest growers. People arrived because work that means something is rarely invisible for long. At 11, the rain hardened. The crew wavered. Liam lifted his face to it and spoke without raising his voice. Listen, he said, and for a beat, everything did. The drops, the lights, the city, even the chat feed. This is the sound, asking us if we meant what we said. Answer with your hands, they did. Sometime after midnight, Clara found herself shoulder to shoulder with Rosa, tamping soil around a fir. I've signed contracts my entire life, Clara said, breath fogging. This is the first promise I've ever had to build with a shovel. Rosa smiled sideways. It's the only kind the rain respects. Martin appeared at the edge of the floodlight's umbrella, up like a shield. He stood without speaking, a figure that wanted to be thunder, but settled for drizzle. When he finally turned away, Harper's camera followed him for 3 seconds, long enough to say, "We saw you leave." At 2, Eli fell asleep on 2 stacked seed trays, jacket curled under his head. Liam draped a tarp over him like a tent and kept going, a steady metronome of motion. By dawn, the quadrant had a shape you could trust. Not finished, never finished, but legible. Swales knitted the contours. Mulch breathed the canopies. Small green punctuation marks waited for wind to write them into sentences. A robin landed on a maple stake, cocking its head as if to say, early, but promising. Harper's stream ticked past 100,000 views. The comments had shifted from cynicism to recipes compost community patience. Rosa checked her watch. 6 hours until the board wants numbers. We'll give them something better, Liam said. We'll give them a morning, he radioed Ralph. I need a hose up top. Slow flow. Ralph crackled back on its way. Weather says light rain. Let's teach the ground the difference between storms and kindness. They watered not as a performance, but as a conversation. The swales swallowed. The soil drank and sighed. Small rivulets chose the paths Rosa had drawn. Nothing flooded where it shouldn't. Everything held. Clara stood at the quadrant's edge, raincoat, unbuttoned, hair damp, a smear of clean earth on her cheek like war paint for a gentler war. She looked at Liam. If this works, she said, we change the story. We tell this city about itself. It already is the story, he replied. We're just writing it in a font people can read. Harper lowered her phone for the first time in hours. I need to say something on record, she said to Clara. You could have hidden the rot. You didn't. Whatever happens next, remember you picked the harder truth. Clara nodded once. I'm tired of winning the easy way and losing what matters. The council members arrived early, coffees in hand. Skepticism braced. Donors drifted back. Workers lined the temporary fence, curious. All right, said the councilwoman, looking over. The quadrant. That was not a miracle and not a stunt, but something stubbornly hopeful. Show us. Liam gestured to the swales, the placement, the runoff paths now at rest. He pointed to insect activity at the mulch line, to the way the ferns had uncurling confidence, to a hummingbird that impossibly had returned to test the current. He didn't oversell. He let the quadrant speak. The councilman crouched, pressed too, fingers to the soil, and looked up. Feels like it belongs. Clara glanced at Martin. Numbers, she asked. Martin had none that would argue with a robin and a hummingbird and a ground that wasn't lying. He cleared his throat. Well, need longer-term data. We'll have it, Clara said, but the direction is clear. Silence held like a breath about to become a yes. Rosa leaned toward Liam, voice low. 48 hours, he shook his head. 47 and some change. He looked at Eli, awake now, rubbing his eyes, and we used every minute. Clara stepped forward, turning to face the crowd, the city, the board, the cameras, the rain. We will scale this quadrants model, she said. Emerald Park will be planted with what wants to live here. We'll honor our contracts where we can, and our conscience where we must, and when we open in 30 days, I want people to feel like they've walked into a place that remembers them a beat. Then the kind of applause you get in the rain, hands against, coats, honest and warm. Harper's stream exploded. Somewhere Martin's smile became a mask he would have to take off later alone. Clara turned to Liam. You promised me a heartbeat. He listened. So did she. The quadrant made a sound only a few would hear, the quiet yes of water going where it should. There it is, he said. And the city, which had been holding its breath, let a little of it go. The press conference wasn't planned. Not officially. By noon, the small quadrant Liam and the team had built was still holding against the morning steady rain ferns, upright swales guiding the water like trained dancers, maples whispering to the wind. Harper's live stream had crossed 200,000 views, and now there were news vans parked at the curb. Martin arrived first, crisp suit, under a black overcoat, eyes scanning the crowd like a chessboard. He avoided looking at Liam as if doing so would concede something. Clara arrived moments later in boots and a rain jacket, hair tied back her hands still carrying the faint earthy smell of the worksite. The councilwoman approached with a clipboard. We've reviewed the initial inspection report, she began, voice pitched to carry over the hum of reporters. The quadrant meets and in some cases exceeds stormwater retention benchmarks. Insect activity is healthy. And she glanced at the volunteer entomologist on her right. They've already attracted pollinators, the man added. Not normal for new plantings at this density. It means the ecosystem knows it's welcome. That line, the ecosystem knows it's welcome, spread through the gathered crowd like a warm current. Even the donors murmured. Martin cleared his throat. With all due respect, this is a controlled sample. Scaling it to the full park will invite massive risk. We have contract schedules and you had contaminated stock. Harper interrupted from the second row, her voice steady. Half the imported plants were already dying before they touched Seattle soil. I have the supplier invoices and the import health reports from the Department of Agriculture. A ripple moved through the group. Cameras pivoted to Martin, his jaw flexed. Those documents are proprietary. Not when public funds are involved, Harper shot back, pulling a thin folder from her bag and handing it to the councilwoman. Every word is public record now. Clara stepped forward, her voice low, but clear enough to cut through the noise. Martin, how long have you known? His eyes flicked to her. I did what was necessary to keep the project on track. Liam, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Keeping it on track isn't the same as keeping it alive. The crowd went quiet. His tone wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of someone who had buried more than just plants. You think you can run a project of this size with sentimental ideals? Martin snapped. Seattle needs results, not poetry. Liam met his gaze. Healthy ground is results. Everything else is a ribbon on a coffin. It landed like a gavel strike. Someone in the press pool murmured, That's your headline. The councilwoman closed Harper's folder with a deliberate motion. Until further notice, procurement for Emerald Park will shift to local suppliers. The quadrant model will be scaled immediately. Mr. Cole, your role in procurement is suspended pending review. Martin's face went pale. He started to protest, but the sound died in his throat when Clara turned to him, not with anger, but with something worse, disappointment. You could have built something honest, she said quietly. Instead, you built a schedule. Harper caught it on camera. It was the kind of line that stays in documentaries. The work didn't stop for the drama. By afternoon, crews were digging, laying compost, arranging root balls like puzzle pieces. Rosa moved between teams, marking contours with her boots, explaining how water would read the land. Eli trailed Liam carrying a small bucket of mulch like it was treasure. "Dad," he whispered, "do you think Mr. Cole hates us now?" Liam paused, crouching to his son's height. "People don't hate you for telling the truth, Eli. They hate the truth for making them see something they wanted to ignore." Eli thought about that. "So we just keep planting." "Yeah." Liam smiled. "We just keep planting." Harper had turned the live stream into a rolling documentary slipping between interviews and raw footage of shovels hitting dirt. In one clip, Clara was laughing with a group of volunteers. Her cheeks flushed the tension of the last weeks, replaced by something almost light. When Harper panned back to Liam, she asked, "What's the biggest thing you've learned in all this?" "That people show up," he said simply. "Even when you think they won't, they just need a reason that feels worth their hands." By evening, the first larger section of the park had begun to take shape. It wasn't glamorous, no manicured lawns or imported blooms, but it looked alive, the kind of alive that doesn't need ribbon cutings to prove it. Clara stood at the center path, looking around as rain softened to mist. She turned to Liam. "I used to think leadership was about making the hard calls alone. Now I'm starting to think it's about making the right calls together." Liam glanced at the volunteers laughing as they loaded empty plant crates. "It's harder," he said, "but it lasts longer." They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the faint trill of a bird somewhere in the young canopy. Clara smiled. "You realize in 30 days, people will be walking here thinking it's always been this way." "That's the best compliment," Liam replied, "that it feels inevitable." Harper caught that too. The news ran with it that night. Local channels led with community-led quadrant model forces, park overhaul, and from controversy to canopy. National outlets picked it up as a human interest piece. Harper's footage of Eli planting a fern beside his dad went viral with the caption, "The smallest hands can still grow the future." Martin disappeared from the site the next day. Clara didn't mention him again, except in closed meetings where his name was followed by the words audit and ethics review. What filled the space he left wasn't just plants, it was trust. Donors doubled their commitments not because of glossy renderings, but because they had stood in the rain and watched strangers build something real. Late that night, when the site was quiet and the city's lights blurred in the mist, Liam stayed behind. He walked to the path through the quadrant boots, soft in the mulch. Rosa had left a small wooden marker near the edge of the maple grove. It read, "Proof lives here." He didn't know if it was meant for him, for Clara, or for the city. Maybe all three. Clara appeared from the shadows, hands in her pockets. "Couldn't sleep?" He shook his head. "Places like this, they're different at night. You can hear the ground. Breathe." She stepped beside him, their shoulders almost touching. "Thank you," she said, "for not walking away when you had every reason to." He looked at her, then the lamplight catching in his eyes. "You don't walk away from something that's worth the work." Neither of them moved for a long time. The park, still young, still fragile, felt like a promise in the making. And for the first time since this all began, Clara believed the city might keep it. No one could have predicted the sound the city would make that Saturday morning. It wasn't the rumble of traffic or the chatter of open-air markets. It was shovels striking soil, laughter rippling across the park, and the soft rustle of thousands of seedlings being lowered into new homes. The Emerald Reborn campaign had started as a small call to action Harper posted online. Within a week, it had turned into a city-wide movement. Schools, retirement homes, fire stations, community centers, all had sent volunteers. Even rival corporations that once fought Westcorp's expansion quietly donated gloves, tools, and truckloads of native plants. Liam stood at the center of it all, his old work boots caked with soil. Eli was beside him, sporting a too-big volunteer t-shirt that hung like a cape. Clara was on the other side, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled into a loose braid. Her expensive watch replaced with a $20 garden timer she kept checking like it was made of gold. "Never thought I'd see a billionaire CEO on mulch duty," Harper teased, camera trained on Clara. Clara grinned, brushing dirt off her cheek. "Leadership's easy behind a desk. It's harder when the work gets under your nails, but it's also where you find out who you are." Harper lowered the camera just long enough to mutter, "That's going in the opening montage." The planting was organized, like an orchestra. Rosa moved like a conductor, clipboard in hand, guiding volunteers to their sections. Maples along the north swale pollinator beds to the east. "Remember, give each root ballroom to breathe. Plants grow like people. They need space to thrive." Eli waved at her from the mulch pile. "We've got ferns," he shouted proudly. "You've got the shade-loving heroes." Rosa called back, smiling. Clara leaned toward Liam. "You do realize your son has somehow become the unofficial mascot of this entire thing?" Liam chuckled. "He's got my stubbornness and his mom's charm. Dangerous combination." Her smile softened, and for a moment she studied him. "And you? What do you get out of all this?" He wiped sweat from his brow. "Peace. Haven't had much of that in years." He glanced at the volunteers around them and proof that maybe we all still know how to build something worth keeping. Midday brought the first surprise. An elderly man in a wool cap approached with a sapling in a worn burlap sack. "This one's from my backyard," he said. "Been growing there since my wife planted it 40 years ago. She passed last spring. Thought it might like to keep growing here." Liam accepted the sapling gently as though it were made of glass. "Well, find it the perfect spot," he promised. They chose a rise overlooking the center path. Clara helped steady the tree as Liam and the man lowered it into the soil. When they finished, the man pressed a hand to the trunk. "She'd have liked this," he murmured before walking away. Clara watched him go. "You can't buy moments like that," she said quietly. "No," Liam agreed, "but you can make a place where they happen." By afternoon, the park looked like it had been breathing for years. The bare mud from weeks ago was now dappled with green ferns. Wildflowers, young trees swaying gently in the spring breeze. Children darted between planting zones, their laughter echoing off the nearby buildings. Then came the rain, not the kind that drives people indoors, but a soft, steady drizzle that seemed almost ceremonial. No one left. In fact, they laughed more. Clara tilted her face upward, raindrops glistening on her lashes. "Seattle's blessing the park," she joked. Eli ran up hair plastered to his forehead. "Dad, you've got to see the bees. They're already here." Liam followed him to a patch of purple lupine where a small swarm moved methodically from bloom to bloom. "Told you," he said, ruffling Eli's hair. "If you build the right home, life finds its way in." Harper caught it on camera, narrating softly. "And sometimes it finds its way back to you." As the day wound down, volunteers began to gather near the main path. Someone had set up a simple wooden sign painted in green emerald park, grown by the hands of Seattle. Beneath it, in smaller letters, "Proof lives here." Clara stepped onto a small platform, still in her muddy boots. "I've spent most of my life making deals in boardrooms," she began. but nothing I've signed has ever meant as much as what we've done here today. This park isn't mine. It isn't West Corp's. It belongs to the people who showed up rain or shine and put their hands in the soil because they believed in something bigger than themselves. Her gaze found Liam, and to the man who reminded me that leadership isn't about being in front, it's about standing beside. There was a murmur in the crowd, warm and approving. Liam looked down at his boots, pretending to adjust his gloves. Then, Eli piped up loud enough for everyone to hear. "Can we do it again next weekend?" Laughter broke out, and Clara leaned toward him. "If your dad's okay with it, we might just have to." The sun broke through just before sunset, casting the park in a gold that made every leaf glow. Liam and Clara stood side by side, watching people drift toward the exits, their clothes muddy, their faces lit with the satisfaction of a day well spent. "You ever think about what it'll look like in 10 years?" Clara asked. "All the time," Liam replied. "But I'm more interested in what it'll feel like tomorrow when people walk past and see it still here, still growing. That's how hope works. Not all at once, but steady." She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing whether to say what was on her mind. "I used to think I'd have to give up parts of myself to build something lasting. You've shown me I might just need to give more of myself instead." Liam glanced at her, a small smile, tugging at his mouth. "That's the thing about gardens. They grow what you feed them, whether it's soil, water, or heart." As twilight settled, the two of them walked the path. One last time. The air smelled of rain and cedar mulch. Somewhere in the distance, the city hummed, but here in the park it was quiet enough to hear the leaves whisper. Neither of them said it out loud, but both knew the real work was just beginning, and maybe, just maybe, they'd be doing it together. The morning the city came to meet its new heart, the sky took its time. A pearly light unrolled over the sound, turning cranes into quiet silhouettes and glass towers into lanterns. The gates of Emerald Park stood open. No velvet ropes, no guards counting heads, just a simple arch of reclaimed cedar, carved with 3 words that had started as a whisper on a rooftop. "Proof lives here." Clara arrived early, boots clean for the last time that day. A small stack of note cards in her pocket she already knew she wouldn't need. West Corp banners were smaller than usual, tucked at the edges like courtesy rather than claim. Along the central path, volunteers tied ribbons of green cloth to sapling stakes. Children threaded through the ferns, transferring secrets to leaves the way children do. Liam stood at the quadrant that had begun everything, hand on a maple stake as if taking a pulse. Eli skipped circles around him, then stopped, breath frosting the cool air. "Dad, do you think the park knows it's today?" "It knew yesterday," Liam said, smiling. "Today is just the part where people catch up." Rosa joined them with a roll of plans under her arm, hair pulled back, eyes bright with the sleeplessness of good work. "I checked the swales," she said to Liam. "They're holding like they were born here." "They were," he answered. "We only remembered it." A small hush moved through the crowd when Clara stepped to the low stage. Just a plank platform set between 2 young firs. No orchestra, no pyrotechnics. A single mic, a row of folding chairs. A city arriving with its hands already out. "Good morning," she said, and her voice carried like something the park had been waiting to hear. 30 days ago, this place was a promise drawn on paper. 2 weeks ago, it was mud and questions. Today, it is a living answer. She looked over the faces. Council members, donors, nurses, and scrubs on their way to shift a bus driver in a reflective vest. School kids with dirt on their knees. Emerald Park wasn't built by a press release, Clara continued. It was built by hands, by people who decided that the truth about soil, about water, about what belongs was worth their time. A ripple of warmth moved through the crowd. She led it. "I want to thank our team," she said, nodding toward Rosa, who dipped her head a little overwhelmed, and to Ralph at the back, who saluted with a thermos. Then Clara's eyes found Liam, and to the man who taught us to listen before we designed Liam Brooks. The applause surprised him. It had the sound of gratitude rather than spectacle. Liam didn't step forward. He just lifted a hand. Eli clapped, like he was trying to keep the sound from stopping. Clara folded her notes without looking at them. My father used to say, "You win deals by making the other side believe you've already won." Maybe he was right about business. But cities aren't won. They're tended. And the only way to tend them is together. She rested a hand on the cedar lectern. So here is our promise. Emerald Park will be maintained with the same honesty it was planted, local species, community days, open data on survivability and water usage. We'll report what works and what needs fixing, because pretending is how things die quietly. Telling. The truth is how they grow. A boy in the front whispered to his mother, "She's the boss," and the mother smiled. Today, she said, we all are. Laughter rippled like wind in alder leaves. Clara's gaze softened. There's one more thing, she added. This park is dedicated to the people who stayed when it was easier to walk away, neighbors, volunteers, and one woman who taught me that gardens are what you give your heart to when your hands can't fix the weather. Her voice thinned a breath. To my mother. Silence. Then soft applause that felt more like a hand on a shoulder than a cheer. Let's open our park, Clara said with no ribbon, just roots. She stepped down and together with Rosa and Ralph, she lifted the simple wooden latch. The crowd didn't surge. It entered the way you enter a sanctuary, curious, respectful, a little giddy. Children took to the paths like birds discovering new thermals. A veteran paused at the vine maples and closed his eyes. The elderly man in the wool cap found the hill where he'd planted his wife's sapling and rested his palm against the young trunk. Morning, he whispered. Look at you. Harper moved through the scene with her camera recording nothing and everything, the way a nurse bent to show her daughter a bee working a lupine, the way a donor with a watch like a planet stooped to rescue a worm from a hot patch of path. She caught Clara near the quadrant laughing as Eli explained his taxonomy of quiet heroes ferns and loud heroes hummingbirds. When Harper finally clicked the mic on, it was only to say, Seattle, we did this. Near noon, the councilwoman approached. Liam. Mr. Brooks, she said, we've created a new advisory role for the city's green spaces. Pay's modest, influence is honest. Interested? Liam glanced at Clara, who lifted an eyebrow that said, say yes if your gut does. He looked back at the councilwoman. If the job description includes listening to rain, he said, I'm qualified. It does now, she replied. Rosa found them beaming. Also, she told Liam Westcorp would like to formalize your role, Director of Urban Ecology shared appointment with the city. I may have added the title to a draft before asking. Rosa. Clara Ara said with mock sternness, You can't just add titles. Rosa shrugged. I can if they're true. Clara turned to Liam. We want to pay you to do what you've already been doing. Teach us to let the land remember itself. You won't have to trade your boots for a boardroom. Just bring them with you. Liam looked down at the boots that had carried him through grief and jobs with no names and nights where the only thing that answered was the weather. He nodded once. All right, he said, but I keep my mop. Humble tools keep honest people. Deal, Clara said, and her smile reached the part of her face she rarely let the world see. They wandered the paths together, not speaking at first. The park made its own small music shovel handles clacking as volunteers stacked tools, a child's shout turning into a giggle, the zest of a cyclist's freewheel on the outer loop. At the pilot quadrant, a hummingbird sowed itself through the red, flowering current needle-fine tongue-stitching sweetness out of air. Clara stopped. Do you hear that? She asked. The heartbeat, Liam said. She nodded. I thought it was a metaphor. So did I. He replied, until it wasn't. Eli ran ahead, then doubled back, panting. "There's a lady by the sign crying, but the good, kind," he reported. "Should I get her water?" "Get her a bench," Liam said. "Sometimes sitting is water." They found the woman, a teacher who'd brought her class the first weekend of planting. She wiped her eyes, laughing at herself. "Sorry," she said. "It's just, I've lived here 31 years. I kept waiting for something that felt like us." Clara's throat tightened. "Welcome home," she said simply. As afternoon tilted toward gold, the crowd thinned to families lingering and teenagers taking photos in front of the cedar arch. The park looked less like a debut and more like a habit. That was the point. Near the hill, the elderly man in the wool cap waved Liam over. When they asked who saved the city, he said, "Tell them it was the people who showed up in the rain." Liam nodded. "And the ones who let them." The man chuckled that too. At the stage, a small group gathered for closing words. Clara didn't climb the platform this time. She stood among them. "This park won't be perfect," she said. "We'll make mistakes. We'll learn. We'll prune what overreaches and protect what's young. That's not failure. That's stewardship." She took a breath. "And if we ever forget why it exists, listen for the kids. They'll remind us." Eli squeezed her hand on reflex. She squeezed back, surprised at how natural it felt. As the last light sifted through the new canopy, Rosa raised the wooden marker she'd made and looked to Clara for a nod. Clara nodded. Rosa planted it at the path's edge where everyone would pass, grown by the hands of Seattle. Clara turned to Liam. Somewhere inside the long day, the private calculus had finished the sums equal and finally kind. "Liam," she said softly, "you once told me, pretty dies and belonging lasts. I want to belong to this work, to this city." And she hesitated, then finished with the courage the park had taught her, "to whatever this is that keeps finding us in the rain." He didn't rush an answer. He looked at her the way he looked at weather. Respectful, grateful, aware. "Then let's tend it," he said. Slow. True. The way good roots do. Eli groaned the way only 10-year-olds can when adults say words that might become vows. "Does this mean we're going to dinner together?" he asked, hopeful and practical. Clara laughed, bright and unguarded. "Yes, Eli. It means exactly that." Harper clicked one last photo. Not staged, not framed, just 3 people standing in a park that had chosen to live. When the gates finally closed for the night, the city felt different in the only way that matters. It felt possible. The rain returned softer now, tapping its patient applause on the leaves, and beneath the new soil, where no camera could see and no speech could claim 1,000 small roots, threaded the dark with quiet certainty holding. Not because anyone demanded it, because they belonged. And that is how a garden became more than trees and flowers. It became proof that hope can be planted and kindness can take root anywhere if we dare to believe in it. But now I want to hear from you. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Tell me your city, your country, because every place has its own garden waiting to be saved. And maybe your story will inspire the next one. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next journey of love, courage, and second chances. And if you know someone who needs a reminder that change is possible, share this story with them. From my heart to yours, thank you for spending this time with me. Until we meet again, take care of each other and keep planting the seeds of something beautiful.